All right, welcome to SCUBA class. So this is a whole new world that you're about to explore, and you are entering, to me, one of the coolest places on earth that not a lot of people get to see. This is a SCUBA Educators International certification. Used to be YMCA, and I'm your instructor, Gabrielle Gabrielli. The website is scubawithgabrielle.com. So we're going to get started right away with Module 1, which is a little bit about the program and student introductions. Who are you? What made you want to learn to scuba? Who would like to begin?
I can start.
Great.
Okay, so I'm Christy Mertz. I'm interning with Gabrielle this semester, and I'm a master's student in instructional design. So I'm studying how to create training and support those solutions in the workplace. What made me want to learn scuba? I've always, I guess like the past 4 years I've wanted to do it, but I've always made up excuses for myself. And I'm a little afraid of the water, so I just want to overcome that fear.
Good.
Well,
Your name?
I'm Kip, and my Boy Scout troop down in Tampa was part of them basically since I moved there like 8 years ago, and now they're going down to the Keys this summer, and I have to be certified before then, or I'm going to be spending half of it learning how to scuba. So
Right.
I want to go through all that.
Good deal. Great.
My name is Brittany Moore, and I work for the Office of Greenways and Trails for the Florida Park Service. And I am doing scuba because I've always been interested in it. And until recently, I did not think I was able to until recently, and I was told I can. So it's very exciting for me to be able to participate.
Great.
I'm Miranda Gottlieb. I moved to Florida in December and just wanted to take advantage of all things Florida, and we'll be going to some places that have really great scuba, and I snorkeled in February and was like, I need more. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome.
My name is Jeff Budnick. I'm a programmer for FSU, and I'm going on a cruise that has a scuba excursion. So
Nice.
get prepared for that.
Where are you going to?
Bahamas.
Okay.
I think it's Nassau, Half Moon Cay, and Freeport.
Great. Excellent. Good deal.
Yeah.
So we've already gone over the times, costs, and what's included. So I'll zip through that. Requirements for certification are going to be, it was in your email as well, but it's going to be 4 scuba dives plus 1 skin dive, and that's accomplished in 2 full days. The first day that we have our scuba dives, in between dives, we do the skin dive. And then the second day, we do 2 scuba dives. So why SEI diving? Well, it's a longer course, for one. We really focus on learning. Education is our priority. There's a certain other agency that I like to call the Walmart of scuba. You'll hear their acronyms a lot. You'll hear their acronym a lot, but they're the ones that really just push for weekend courses where you're going to get certified. And I've seen people do this. It's really scary. They're the ones that make the headlines. They get certified in a day, literally one day. They might have, a couple hours of classroom and then maybe 1 or 2 hours in the pool, and then they're diving. Like, they're literally doing their open water dives, like, immediately, and they're terrible divers, and they're unsafe, and it's scary, and there's a lot of incidents that happen around that. So we're not, our agency's not very good at marketing, but definitely focus on education and diving comfort in the real world. Also, there's a big concern for how students learn. Education is a big part of what we do, so it's in our name. It's a chance to expand your life and see the other half of the world. So what does SCUBA mean? What do you think it means? What's the acronym stand for?
I know we should know this.
A lot of people should know it.
Self-contained underwater breathing
Yes.
apparatus.
Yes, very good. And I actually like to say it stands for strategically changing unwanted beliefs and attitudes. Because I think a lot of people have fears and anxieties and a lot of other things, even from the outside world, people looking at people with disabilities and thinking, "Now, why are they diving? They can't dive." So to me, it's about changing mindset. So who do we have to thank for scuba? Think of a name that's really big through history in scuba. Anyone? Jacques Cousteau. Has anyone heard of Jacques Cousteau?
Yeah, explorer.
Yes. Right. So the world beneath the sea is amazing. When you're suspended, you feel weightless, and you get to see a lot of really cool animal life, including on a coral reef. And so it's a lot of fun. The course outline consists of 8 total modules. The 7th and 8th will be covered in the final lecture. That's one thing we forgot to do with our schedule. Don't let me leave. We got to schedule 2 more lectures. Okay? So we need one more lecture where we have a lecture, and that lecture is kind of intensely brain focused on dive tables and such. And then the final lecture is a review session and the exam. And so I recommend we have 2 weeks between the first and the second lecture so that you have a chance to read the book. And your book it's not that different. So, okay, you'll be fine. So tonight we're going to go through 4 of the lectures. All right? So diving actually dates back to a lot longer than people realize. So free diving back to 3000 BC. Jacques Cousteau then invented demand scuba in 1943. The first YMCA instructor course was in 1959. And YMCA, which used to be Scuba Educators International, SEI, became SEI in 2008. That's right when the economy tanked. And YMCA made a decision to get rid of scuba, and several instructor trainers came together and decided that was not a good idea. We have the highest standards in the industry. Those standards have been maintained. So an agreement was made, and essentially YMCA, YScuba became SEI. We have a great diving community here, including one that I developed called Scuba Friends. And it's not Scuba Friends of Tallahassee. That guy copied me. It's just Scuba Friends. But the great thing about getting certified for me is that anytime you want to go diving, anytime, you'll see I'm diving constantly. And I will invite people in Scuba Friends to come diving. And let's say you don't have your own gear because you don't want to spend the money or you don't have the money. Come diving with me, and there's never any cost to come diving with me other than chip in on the cylinders. And so the cylinders cost $5 to fill with air. So it's a really good deal. You can have a full day of 2 nice, long, beautiful dives, and it'll cost you $10. And you'll get all your gear included at no cost, and so it's a really good deal. And I do that because I want to encourage people to keep diving, to continue to get as much experience as possible, to enjoy the sport. The more you dive, the better diver you become. And so that's key. Once you really get into it, then you're going to want to, not just dive on weekends. You're going to want to do liveaboards and all kinds. Liveaboards are where you just eat, sleep, dive. That's what I do now. I love it. When I go on vacation, I do liveaboards. They're a lot of fun. Your certification card will be worldwide recognized, but we're the only U.S. agency that's also recognized by CMOS, which is a European agency. And so if you do want an additional certification with CMOS, there's just a charge for the card. And it's on my registration form, but I think it's like an extra maybe $25, and you would have 2 cards out of this one class. So at the end of this, you will have an open water diver certification. So the open water diver will certify you to 60 feet. Now there is a test question that's going to ask you about what is the recreational limit for open water diving with SEI, and the answer is going to be 100 feet, but that's if you are an advanced open water diver, which would be your next step. It's 60 feet for an open water diver, and that's pretty standard across all agencies. It's 60 feet.
Is that enforced by what?
It's not really enforced, to be honest with you, but I will tell you all the reasons why it should be enforced and why you should enforce it yourself, especially because when people dive beyond their limits, that's when, bad things tend to happen, medically and otherwise, when people don't understand what might happen when they dive too deep, for example. So, yeah. But it's really not. Now, if you're on a boat, they will enforce it. They'll check your card if they say, hey, this is only advanced divers are allowed on this boat, and you only have open water, they won't let you on the boat. So, I am right here. I'm an instructor trainer with Scuba Educators International, and so I can take you all the way through dive master and assistant instructor, and all the way to instructor. What I recommend after open water is going to be advanced and nitrox. I do a combination class. It's a really good class, and it gets you 5 additional dives of experience. But there's a lot of other certifications you can get to. Your packet includes a Part A and a Part B. If you want to follow along with Part B with class notes, you'll see that there are some blanks, and some people like doing that, and some people kind of get stuck on the blanks, but you're welcome to do that if you want to follow along. And Part A is homework. Kip, when you walked in, I told you even though you're 16 years old, you're considered an adult in this class. So that means I don't check your homework. It's up to you if you want to do your homework. If you want to come in the next class and ask me questions about your homework, then I will be prepared to answer your questions. But I'm not going to check your homework. When I taught this at Florida State University, I taught this class at Florida State, and we checked people's homework. You're grown-ups here, okay? So it's up to you. Also in your packet is a dive table and dive log book. You should have those things in your packet as well, okay? Medical requirements, you already submitted that. You need to answer yes or no. Are there risks with scuba? Of course there are. There's risk just walking out your door, right? There's a risk. There's actually a lot more risk with driving than diving. But a big part of the risks with scuba have to do with dealing with pressure-related injuries like decompression sickness and body air spaces. And there's the need for training. You have to make sure that you're up on your training. And you need to keep yourself refreshed. If you got certified and then you didn't dive for a long time, that would not be a good thing. That would be dangerous. There are also contraindicators, such as if you're pregnant, if you have seizures, or you have lung issues. So the other person who was signed up for this class, who was medically declined, she was declined because she had a history of a collapsed lung, so she wasn't able to take the class. The goal is to minimize risk and maximize enjoyment. Now, the biggest risk is holding your breath. So always exhale on ascent when on scuba. Never hold your breath. Cardinal rule of scuba diving, always exhale. Keep breathing. And the thing is, when we're stressed on land, we tend to hold our breath a lot. So you have to keep breathing, okay? Now, as a student in my class, you'll all be getting emails by tomorrow. I will provide you with insurance for the duration of this class. And so, and those of you who signed up with me previously, you're still covered as my students. So this basically will cover you if there is ever an incident. I do strongly encourage you to continue with your Divers Alert Network coverage after you have earned your certification. It's a nonprofit organization based in North Carolina, and they are wonderful. I can't say enough positive things about what they do for the value you get. It's like $35 a year or something, and it's really good. Of course, there's different levels above that, but that's all you need. Now, skin diving equipment. Does anyone already have their own mask, fin, snorkel, and booties? No? You do? Okay, good. Okay.
Snorkel's just.
Yeah. You have that too? And the fins you have, do they have you have boots too? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Perfect. So you're going to need these. And I'll go over what you need, okay? And I highly recommend, if you don't have them already, you go to Coral Reef Scuba to get them. on Capitol Circle. So you're going to want these kinds of boots that where you wear a boot, and the winter boot, not the summer boot, the winter boot, okay? The summer boot are little thin things, and you're going to freeze to death in the springs. And then you're going to want this kind of fin that has a strap on the back. The snorkels, you just want a simple snorkel. You don't want a dry snorkel that, is good for skin diving. It's just going to get in the way. Mask, this is actually a test question. The most important thing about a mask is fit. So some of us look at masks and we think, oh, that's so pretty. I like that color. Fit is the most important thing. So how to determine if a mask fits is you try it on without putting the strap on. You hold it up to your face. You suck in with your nose. You let go. And if it stays on, then it's fitting well. So you can see standing in front of a mirror, this girl doing that. Does anyone in here wear contacts? Okay. So I scuba dive with contacts, and it's not a problem. I can modify things in the pool for you. Some people have particularly bad vision and they want to use corrective, they want to get corrective lenses in their mask. Personally, my vision isn't very good without correction, but I don't want to have to wear a mask when I'm on a dive boat, and switch from glasses to a mask. And so to me, I'd rather just wear my contacts. It's not a big deal. So snorkels. Again, you don't really want a big, bulky snorkel like this one. You just need something simple. Some people get like a semi-dry snorkel. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a snorkel. And again, fins, you don't want this kind of fin that's an all-in-one thing. You'll see dive masters wearing these because they need to get in and out of the boat quickly, but what you want is something that's very protective from a thermal standpoint. You want a boot with a nice fin with a strap. If you go to Coral Reef and you tell them that you're my student and you're diving with me, they know what you need. Okay. All right, let's talk about an introduction to diving sciences. This is where I'm going to kind of bombard you with information, and then we're going to go back and I'll get into more detail on these. Ears. Does anyone have ear problems, sinus problems, anything like that happen frequently?
I have sinus problems.
Okay.
I mentioned to you yesterday, but this week has been great ever since I started the nasal.
Good deal. That's great. Anyone have ear issues at all?
Well, I've been sick in the last couple of weeks, but other than that, it's not a
Okay.
recurring thing.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, we'll talk about ears more, but ears are really important. But does everybody know how to clear their ears? Yeah? Okay. Do you know how to clear your ears, Kip? Like, have you been on a plane at all? Okay. Do you know when pressure starts to build up in them? Do you know how to make them pop? Yeah, you can yawn or plug your nose and blow out. Everyone just practice right now. Make sure that you can actually shift your jaw, whatever it takes to clear them. That's going to be important, and on Sunday in the pool, you're going to practice that. It's going to be really, really important for you to clear your ears. If you are sick at all, you have a cold or anything, take a Sudafed. Otherwise, it's going to be miserable for you, okay? Now, I do have something called Dox Pro Plugs. I'm a distributor for Dox Pro Plugs, which are the only vented plug on the market, and I'll show you a picture of those later, too. All right, let's talk about respiration and circulation. Air that we breathe is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other. And the same consistency of gases is what we breathe when we scuba dive. Hemoglobin is 45% of our blood, and it carries oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. Hyperventilation is something that happens not with scuba divers, but with free divers. And we're one of the only agencies that actually teaches free diving as well. So you'll be learning some free diving skills in the scuba session. But one thing that can happen with free divers is they can have something called hyperventilation-induced blackout. And so a lot of free divers are diving deeper than they ever have before. They're pushing the limits, and often they have scuba diver station to help them when they pass out on the way coming back up. So you want to avoid hyperventilation-induced blackout when snorkeling. And this is a kind of thing that you can see what happens when people have hyperventilation-induced blackout with the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels. All right, let's talk about air-to-water contrasts. Water is 800 times more dense than air, and there are drag forces in water when you're wearing gear. Light travels 27% slower in water. And then there's something called buoyancy that's really important. Archimedes' principle is one of many laws that we'll be going over. Pressure, 14.7 or 33 feet of seawater FSW, absolute pressure, is something that you're going to start to get to know a little bit more as we get into partial pressures, which is dealing with a different law called Dalton's law. Let's talk about Boyle's law. Boyle's law is one of the most important laws to scuba diving. And what Boyle's law says is that pressure and volume are inversely proportional. Okay? And so let's just say that right now at the surface we have 1 ATA, which is atmosphere absolute. Okay? We have 1 atmosphere absolute. We descend to 33 FSW, which is feet of seawater. We have 2 atmospheres absolute. We descend another 33 feet to 66 feet of seawater. We then have 3 atmospheres absolute. You get the picture? Okay? So this is why things like mask squeeze occurs. Because you can see that as the pressure increases, the volume decreases. Other Boyle's law effects include breathing volume, ear clearing. I mentioned mask squeeze already. Wetsuit compression. One of the test questions has to do with, will a diver become heavier or lighter at depth? What do you think, based on what I just told you about Boyle's law? Pressure and volume being inversely proportional. Think about the fact that a wetsuit has air spaces in it. Are you going to become heavier or lighter at depth?
Lighter.
Nope.
You say the same.
Nope.
Your mass is the
Oh.
Heavier.
same.
Yes. You're going to become heavier because the airspace in the wetsuit is going to compress, because pressure and volume are inversely proportional. The airspace in the wetsuit is going to compress, therefore making you heavier.
Yeah,
So you're going to have to add air to your BC. Yeah. Okay? It also has to do with pressure-related injuries. Now let's talk about Dalton's law. I mentioned very briefly Dalton's law earlier. It deals with partial pressures. So what's in a cylinder? I mentioned 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other. All that Dalton's law says that relates to scuba is that each of those gases acts independently of one another. So partial pressures. Henry's law. Now, I like to think of an old man sitting on a front porch holding a soda bottle. His name is Henry. Okay, he's got the old-fashioned soda bottle. And this deals with absorption of gases in our bodies. And so let's just say that the soda bottle was a little shook up. We would want to control that gas space. So we assume the gas space is carbon dioxide, and the release forms bubbles. So this relates to nitrogen in our body released on ascent, and that causes decompression sickness. So nitrogen is a really, really important part of scuba diving. When we get into dive tables, you'll see that nitrogen is everything when it comes to why we have certain time limits and depth limits and surface interval times and everything else. But Henry's law deals with absorption of gases into our bodies. So let's kind of go back a little bit to Boyle's law and ask, how long will your air last? So think about the fact that we have 1 atmosphere absolute at the surface. And if we descend to 33 feet of seawater, how many atmospheres absolute do we have? Yes. So all we're going to do with pressure and volume being inversely proportional is we're going to take 1 over 2 and we're going to get half. So if a cylinder lasts 1 hour at the surface, it's going to last half of that at 2 atmospheres absolute. So it's only going to last how long? Yeah. So 30 minutes, right? So if we go to 99 feet, then how many minutes is it going to last? Because how many atmospheres absolute is it? No, it's 4, right? It's 4. So we're going to take 1 over 4. So it's 1/4 of 60, which is how many minutes? 15. It's only going to last 15 minutes. Okay? Let's talk about heat loss in water. We need to dress for the temperature. People don't realize that we need to wear a wetsuit in anything below 80 degrees. That is a test question, by the way. 80 degrees. So now if you're crazy like the people over there ice diving, you really want to wear probably more than a wetsuit. You're going to wear a dry suit. By the way, SEI does have an ice diving certification. I do not teach it. So if, matter of fact, I have no desire to ice dive. But if you would like to ice dive, I know an excellent instructor in Indiana who wrote this book, and he's the head of Scuba Educators International, and he would be happy to take you ice diving. Vision also changes underwater. Everything is going to look closer and larger than in air. So if something is actually 8 feet away, it's going to appear to be 6 feet away. If something, like you see a fish and it's like, oh my gosh, this fish is 4 feet long, it's really only 3 feet long. So what are you going to tell your friends when you come to the surface about what you saw underwater? Right. Colors change too. Which color do you think disappears first?
Red.
Yep. How'd you know that?
I think it was just something I remember.
Probably the color spectrum. You're thinking back to the color spectrum. How many of you remember Roy-G Biv? Okay. Yeah. We'll get into that more. Sound and hearing. You can't tell the direction of sound. You can hear things. As a matter of fact, the first time I take people where there's boat traffic, they're like, what's going on? Because things sound a lot closer than they are, but you can't tell the direction. That was Module 1. We talked about anatomy, respiration, circulation, buoyancy, drag, light, sound, and pressure, all caused by change in density. We're going to get into Module 2 now, dealing with diving adjustments. And here we're going to talk about physics, thermal adjustments, buoyancy, breathing, hearts, lungs, in-gassing, out-gassing, and mobility. Physical differences between air and water, we need to know those, as well as the laws of physics. We talked a little bit about some of those laws. We want to talk a little bit more about how those laws affect our bodies when it comes to scuba diving, and then how we need to adjust to those changes with depths, volumes, and pressures, and gas composition and absorption. So air is less dense at altitude, so pressure decreases as altitude increases. So that's Boyle's law. So I like to think of Boyle's balloons. Boyle's balloons. Pressure, as pressure increases, volume goes which way? Yeah. And speaking of balloons, if we brought a balloon full of air to, let's say, 40 feet deep, what would happen to that balloon?
Shrink.
Mm-hmm. Because pressure and volume are inversely proportional. Let's talk about water density. 1 cubic foot of air weighs 0.08 pounds. That's not as important to you remember as these next two things are really important for you to remember. 1 cubic foot of fresh water weighs 62.4 pounds, and 1 cubic foot of salt water weighs 64 pounds. So salt water obviously weighs more than fresh water. And so we need to think about these things when we're diving. Maybe 1 week we're diving in fresh water and the next we're diving in salt water. We're going to need to make adjustments to compensate for our buoyancy. So 62.4 and 64. So water is approximately 800 more times dense than air. 33 feet of seawater is 14.7 psi. And again, thinking that we have 1 atmosphere absolute at the surface, that's 14.7 psi. We add the two together, we have 29.4. This is not as important for you to know as open water divers, okay? And most people don't use hydrostatic pressure anymore. So, all right, let's kind of reinforce some of what we talked about. Right now, we have 1 atmosphere absolute. We go to 33 feet. How many do we have? Okay. We go to 66. How many? 99. Good. Now with freshwater, it's going to be 34 feet. Okay, instead of 33. So we have a balloon that has a pint of air in it. We bring it to 33 feet. How much air is going to be in that balloon now?
Well, the volume of it will be
Okay. And what about at 66 feet? 66? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Boyle's balloons. And then when it comes to our lungs on SCUBA, we have 10 pints of surface volume at the surface. And at 2 atmospheres, we have 20. So it's called surface equivalent volume, where it's 2 times denser. So at 3 atmospheres, we have 30 pints. And at 4 atmospheres, we have 40 pints. So this is why a scuba diver needs to exhale on ascent. If we didn't exhale on ascent, what would happen to our lungs? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would have lung rupture. So in the pool, I will drill this into you. And I won't let you go diving in open water until I know you can actually breathe. So you'll be fine. Because in the beginning, what I'll do is I'll like tap, I'll do this to remind you. And if you don't do it, I'll come over and I'll tap your face until you get annoyed with me. And you'll start breathing, okay? Thermal adjustments. Your chance of getting hypothermia in water is 25 times greater than on land. And there are many areas of heat loss. I can tell you from my experience, the greatest areas of heat loss are going to be your head, your hands. So when we're in springs, I'm going to say I have extra sets of gloves and a hood. You probably want to invest in at least gloves. And your torso as well, your core. And I should have wetsuits that fit everybody. So I have about 20 wetsuits, and so I have a limited number of bigger wetsuits, but we only have maybe 1 bigger person in the class. So you'll get to wear my big boy wetsuit. So okay. Overheating is something that we need to be concerned with. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, especially in Florida. So when we wear our wetsuits in Florida, we only zip up to our waist until we're actually ready to suit up and go diving. Otherwise, you would just be miserable. Now, remember we wear a wetsuit anytime it's below 80 degrees. But in extreme temperatures, such as ice diving, you're going to want to wear more than a wetsuit. You're probably going to want to wear a dry suit. When you achieve neutral buoyancy, which is your goal, to be flat in the water, you're going to look like this. It's going to feel awkward at first to get in this position, but neutral buoyancy is key to being a great diver. And so if you see me doing this in the water, it's because I'm trying to get you flat in the water. When people are overweighted, they tend to have their feet down. That's not a good thing. Next, we'll talk about Archimedes' principle, which says that an object submerged in water will be buoyed up by the weight of the water it displaces. So I'm going to give you some scenarios, and I'm going to ask you, will you float, sink, or be neutral? So we're going to weigh an object and then submerge it, and we will catch the water that's displaced and then weigh it. Remember that 1 cubic foot of salt water weighs 64 pounds. Let's just say that we have an object that weighs 58 pounds. Will it float, sink, or be neutral?
Float.
Everyone think float? Okay. Float. Good. 68 pounds. 64 pounds. Right. So other things come into play as well, though, like the shape of an object, the size and weight of the diver, the type and amount of equipment worn, amount of weight, thickness of the wetsuit, amount of air in the BC. And BC is buoyancy compensator, by the way. It's the jacket that you'll be wearing. Amount of air in the cylinder. Yes.
So basically, you want to make yourself heavier than water to go down, and then be
Neutrally
as
buoyant.
easy-
Yeah.
at
You don't
the-
want to be too heavy. And so I'm working on an article now called the 10% myth and it's been perpetuated in scuba diving for decades where people have been overweighting their students, for years. And everyone thinks you're supposed to wear 10% of your body weight. That's way too much. On a bad day, I wear 4 pounds with a wetsuit. Okay, so, and that's just because I'm a really good diver and and I can dive with 0 weight if I want to. But it's because I can get very relaxed in the water. In the beginning, you're going to need to wear a little bit more. And then the goal is just to learn to truly relax yourself in the water. Scuba is a relaxation sport. You will burn calories. You will burn 450 calories an hour for a 150-pound person. So adjust accordingly if you weigh more or less. So you will burn calories, but it's not about swimming fast. It's not about rigorous activity. It's about relaxation. And the best divers are the ones that are able to truly relax. And once you master relaxation in the water, not only will you be able to master it on land better, but you will also become a diver who outlasts other divers with your air consumption, who kind of uses it as, like, I call it like scuba therapy. You really feel really good after diving instead of feeling tired or stressed. So it is something that once you master it, it's a great feeling. Other things that affect buoyancy, amount of air in the lungs and the cylinder. Wetsuit compression at depth, I mentioned already, you're going to get heavier at depth. Items carried on the dive, like cameras and things like that, will play a role as well. And then freshwater versus seawater. So let's just say right now, let's just pretend that our first dive, and we might change our second dive, by the way. If the Gulf of Mexico waters warm up, if our second dive, we decided to do the Gulf of Mexico. Our first dive, we did Big Blue, so we're in freshwater. Our second dive, we switched to the Gulf of Mexico. Are we going to, and everything else is the same. Let's say the water temperature is the same, so we're in the same wetsuit. Are we going to need to add or remove weight for our second dive in the Gulf of Mexico? Why?
Seawater's more dense.
Yep, exactly. We're not going to need to add a lot, but maybe 1 or 2 pounds. So, yeah. Good. So, buoyancy at depth relates to workload, air usage, diving comfort, and stress level. When a diver is negatively buoyant, they look like that. Their head is in up position, feet are in the down. Diver positively buoyant, head is down, feet are up. And what you want to do is have a flat position in the water where it's less resistance and less work. Let's talk about ears a little bit more and how pressure affects us. It's so important to know how to clear your ears. We say clear early and often. Now, sinuses, if your sinuses are bothering you at all, the water will reveal itself to you. And often people that are starting to get sick will start to scuba dive and they'll be like, oh my gosh, my jaw is hurting. Matter of fact, someone who's going to dive with us on the 9th missed his checkout dives because he got sick. So what happens is you have all these air spaces in your face and everything that are sinuses. And when you go to depth, it's like, oh, okay, sometimes you're starting to get sick before you even realize it. And when you're diving, it will reveal itself to you. And I say, by the way, that like the ocean is nature's neti pot. It'll clear you out. But sometimes Sudafed will help.
Do you recommend just taking like a Sudafed?
If you have sinus problems, I would. If you're okay, then I wouldn't. If you're in doubt, I would probably bring them to the pool session with you, and then it would take about 30 minutes before it interacted. So eardrum that's normal looks like that. An eardrum with squeeze, it's pressing in. An eardrum with reverse block, it's pressing out. So our goal is to clear early and often. Clear your ears. I can't say enough about it. And brand new people to diving tend to have struggles with this, especially when they're stressed. And you will be stressed. That you're going to be doing things that are uncomfortable. You're going to be challenging yourself. And so you've got to learn to relax your body and clear your ears. I mentioned before that Docs Pro plugs are the only vented plug on the market for scuba diving, and I'm a distributor for these. They're $15 if you do have ear problems at all, or if you're like me and you sometimes have colds or sinus issues or anything. I carry a pair with me for my trips and stuff, and they're just great to have. And I buy them in red because I went on a trip with someone who had them in clear, and we were in West Palm, and and I don't remember who it was, but she dropped one in the parking lot, and we were like, scurrying around the parking lot trying to find this clear thing, and I was like, I'm just gonna get red. And so I buy all of mine in red, and it's great because anyone who's dropped them, and you will drop them, it's like, oh, there it is, and so nobody actually loses them. All right, let's go through a couple of maneuvers to clear your ears. The Valsalva maneuver. Everybody, go ahead and gently. The key is gentle. I did have a girl actually make her nose bleed, and don't squeeze hard. You just need to do a little bit of pressure, okay? And don't blow hard either. You don't need to blow the heck out of it, You just gently force air up the eustachian tubes and equalize every 2 to 4 feet on descent. And so what happens on ascent? You might need to do a little bit of equalizing as well. It tends to be less obvious unless you have a cold. Breathing adjustments. We're going to talk about a couple of things related to breathing. Lung overexpansion. Skip breathing is something that people who are foolish divers do. I've seen this in other countries where people will breathe every other breath to save their air. Don't do that. Just breathe normally. Okay? Breathe normally. There's a need for clean breathing gas. And this has become less of an issue, but in other countries in the past, third world countries, it was an issue. It's not so much of an issue anymore, as scuba diving has gotten very popular in all kinds of countries. The cardinal rule of diving, again, is always breathe, never hold your breath. If you do hold your breath, you're going to get things like this: pulmonary barotrauma, pneumothorax, mediastinal emphysema, subcutaneous emphysema, or arterial gas embolism. These are all things you don't want to get. And, don't hold your breath when you're scuba diving. All right? Especially on ascent. But just get in the practice of breathing. Anyway, breathing is good for you. Now, you need to be in decent physical shape to scuba dive. The better the shape you're in, the easier time you're going to have scuba diving. Your heart is going to work 1.3 to 1.5 times harder, and there are going to be some things happening in scuba diving, like your heart rate is going to be elevated. And I mean, it's good. It's exercise. So you need to be physically fit to dive. And people who work on things like cardio, again, tend to have better luck with the air consumption and other things. So make sure that you remain physically fit as a diver. Equilibrium adjustments. We'll talk about middle ears and semicircular canals. There's also something that can happen called alternobaric vertigo. This is much less common, but it can cause dizziness and result in upset stomach. I only have experienced it one time, and I was in the Philippines, and I basically traveled halfway around the world to go on this trip, and I got this cold, like everybody had this cold, and I was taking forever to clear my ears, and I'd run out of Sudafed, and and I was coming up. I was actually ascending, and I had to clear my ears on ascent because my ears were like squeaking at me and stuff, and all of a sudden I felt like really dizzy. So in 2,100 plus dives, it's only happened to me one time. And I was like, whoa. And all of a sudden I felt really dizzy and weird. It passed fairly quickly, but it wasn't a pleasant feeling. It's highly unusual. Much more common is going to be seasickness. And the thing is, I see this a lot with people who say, I'll never get seasick. And they get on a dive boat and they get seasick for the first time in their life. And so I do recommend that you take non-drowsy Dramamine or Bonine or whatever you need to not get sick on a dive boat. I can't tell you how many times I'll bring, 10, 12 people scuba diving, and inevitably 1 or 2 people who don't listen to me end up getting sick. And in Florida, 1 to 2 foot seas here, people are like, oh my gosh, the seas are really rough, especially in North Florida. We're kind of spoiled here. In South Florida, I often will be on a dive boat where 8 to 10 foot seas, and we're diving. We're diving, okay? We're here, if it's 3 to 4 feet, we're probably going to call the dive. We're probably not going to dive. So that being said, I do see people get sick in both places. People get sick when they don't take non-drowsy Dramamine or Bonine or whatever. Also watch things like what you eat, what you smell. For me, diesel fumes set me off. I hate the smell of diesel. And the only time I've gotten seasick on a dive boat was on the RV Seminole, a research vessel out of Florida State, and I call it the RV Pucanol because like everybody on the boat was sick. And it was the middle of the summer. It was like 100 degrees, and we were circling around K-Tower, literally circling around K-Tower, circling in the heat, and it's a diesel boat, and the fumes were killing me. And on top of everything else, you're supposed to keep your eyes on the horizon when you're not feeling well. It was a nitrox class, and we're looking down, we're reading things, and I lost it. And on the way out, I remember saying, I've never gotten seasick, and I was like, okay, I heard the message. From here on out, I will take stuff. Visual adjustments. Objects are going to appear 3/4 of the distance and 4/3 of the size. Light loss at depth also occurs. So what is turbidity? What does that mean? Anyone have any guesses? Is it a good thing to have turbidity in the water?
Remember this one.
Yeah, it's not great. No, turbidity. No, it's like particulate in the water. It tends to be, brown. Maybe it's not a good thing. So, and you still have surface light even at 80 feet, but it's going to be less bright. So, colors change too. I mentioned, and remember we said Roy-G Viv. So colors are going to be absorbed. From red to orange to yellow to green to blue to indigo to violet. So what color do you think I wear with my fins and such? I actually wear red. So what color do you think my fins are going to look like at 50 feet? Any other guesses? Green? Closer. Any other guesses? Huh? No? They're gonna look gray. They're gonna look like they have no color at all in them. Yeah. Now you're still gonna be able to notice me. I look very different than other divers at depth. I have distinctive things on my gear it's gonna tell you that it's me instead of other people. Another thing that's really cool is if you have a camera and you use a flash, you will think, wow, that's pretty, and then you get the pictures and you're like, oh my gosh, that was really beautiful. You go back and you realize like things were so much prettier than you even realized in person, and that's because the flash is lighting up all the color that you didn't really get a full appreciation for. All right, let's talk about in-gassing and out-gassing. This is where nitrogen is absorbed and oxygen is used. And this deals with absorption in our body tissues, which are released upon ascent. This is why we do things like have safety stops when we scuba dive, and we have slow ascent rates. This helps us avoid decompression sickness, decompression illness, and we're going to talk about signs and symptoms of those shortly, as well as first aid, which includes oxygen and recompression. What is the soda bottle gas? What's that law? Yes. All right. How do we reduce risk? We make sure that our ascent rates are always less than 30 feet per minute. How slow is 30 feet per minute? It is so slow that you are going to go hand over hands. If you were on a line, it would be this slow, hand over hand. Okay? When you're diving with me, just don't ascend faster than me. And you're going to find, even in the pool, that you're going to ascend faster than me. And I'm going to say, guys, you need to slow down. And I'm going to try to get you in the habit of doing that before we get in open water. We do safety stops at 15 feet for at least 3 minutes. We do these safety stops anytime we dive below pretty much 1 atmosphere below the surface. So if we're diving to 33 feet or less, then we're probably not going to do a safety stop. Now, if you did one, it would be okay, and it's not going to hurt anything. You're just being extra safe. It's fine. But typically, if someone's going to do a 15-foot dive, they're not going to do a safety stop because your safety stop would be at 10 to 15 feet. You've pretty much been doing a safety stop your whole dive. If we do a dive to 40 feet, we're doing a safety stop. And it's going to be at 15 feet. If we're doing a dive to 60 feet, we're doing a safety stop at 15 feet. You see?
But we wouldn't go over 60.
Right. We wouldn't. Now, if you got advanced open water certified and we did a dive to 100 feet, there's some science behind the idea of doing 2 safety stops on deep dives. One at half of the depth. So you would do one at 50 feet and then you do a second one at 15 feet. Okay? But don't worry about that. That's just an aside. Some places have under the boat, they'll have something like this. You can use things like this, but if you get to be a really good diver, you're not going to need to hang on to anything to do a safety stop. In the beginning, when you're not such a great diver, you can do that, hang on to it. But the really good divers, they'll just sit there and, look all scuba zen-like, and they'll stay at depth and be cool, okay? One of the most important things to recognize with decompression sickness is that some of the symptoms are highly unusual. One of the most common symptoms is joint pain. And this is on your test. This is a really important thing to know. Now, this is not joint pain in an area that maybe you always have joint pain, such as you have a bad knee and you come up and your bad knee is hurting you. That's not really telling you anything. But it's joint pain that's unusual. It's not somewhere that you normally have a problem. And it's typically not going to happen on dives at 60 feet. It's going to typically be deeper. But if you did shoot up from 60 feet and you didn't do a safety stop and you bolted to the surface and you did everything wrong, there would be a chance of it. So you need to recognize the signs and symptoms. Other symptoms include tingling, lateral paralysis, limited use of legs, vision problems, dizziness to unconsciousness. Now, in all my dives, 2,106, I think I'm at, I have never seen anyone have decompression sickness, so it's not a really common thing. I've not actually seen anyone have decompression sickness. I've known of one friend who got decompression sickness. He was treated in a hyperbaric chamber, and he's fine, and he's back to diving. First aid, anytime there's any kind of injury and you're not sure what it is. Has anyone had first aid classes or anything? Okay, so what's safe scene mean? Safe scene.
Make sure that there's no blood or sharp objects.
Yeah, you make sure you don't become a victim too. Here's a good example. I was diving on that same trip in the Philippines. There was a guy, actually he was a really terrible diver, and he got a kind of decompression sickness that is where your skin makes like crinkle sounds and stuff. But he was just pushing it's gross. He was pushing the limits. He was diving on air, and he was going to like 150 feet. He was doing everything wrong. But anyway, there was this time he came up, and he was wearing a wetsuit, and he came up, and there was a Portuguese man-o-war on him. But he was wearing a wetsuit, so he comes up, and he's like, ah, and we're like, oh my gosh, and he's like, what, and we're like, there's a Portuguese man-o-war on you, and he's like, no, there isn't. We're like, yes, there is, and he's like, get it off of me. Okay, safe scene. Nobody wants to touch the Portuguese man-o-war, right? So, I know, but he was like, no, he flopped himself on the boat, okay? So he flopped himself on the boat, so we're like, okay, what do we do now? So people get implements. You don't even want to touch them through your gloves. So people get implements. They get metal things and tongs and start picking it off of him, and got it off of him and threw it in the water. But so I know that's just crazy to me. What's ABCs? Airway, breathing, circulation. So you want to check to see, is anything constricting the person's airway? Are they breathing? And is their heart beating? Or they have any problems with their circulation? Lay the person flat, call for help, administer 100% oxygen. Every dive boat has 100% oxygen. I have an oxygen kit, and the treatment is a recompression chamber. We do have a hyperbaric chamber here in Tallahassee, by the way, which my friend who got decompression sickness got to ride in. I got to ride in one, and that's a whole other story. But so sometimes when you're in doubt, you call Divers Alert Network. Whenever you're in doubt about things, you call Divers Alert Network. On that same trip that I was on, I ended up going to Singapore, and I mentioned I ran out of Sudafed. Well, little did I know that people smoke like crazy there, and I'm highly allergic to cigarette smoke. And I ran out of Sudafed. I ran out of Benadryl. Let me correct myself. I ran out of a lot of things, but one thing I ran out of was Benadryl. And so I began having an allergic reaction where my uvula swelled, which is not a symptom of decompression sickness at all. And my tongue swelled, which is not a symptom of decompression sickness. And I knew I needed Benadryl, but I was out. And guess what? They don't sell Benadryl in the Philippines. I then flew to Singapore. They don't sell Benadryl in Singapore. I went to like a medic there, which was a joke of a doctor, and they prescribed something for me, which was probably cold medicine or something. It didn't help. And so my throat was swollen, my tongue was swollen, and the next thing you know, my legs swelled, not a symptom of decompression sickness. So my legs are swollen. They're like elephant legs all of a sudden. Like, well, what is going on? Clearly I'm having like some kind of severe allergic reaction at this point.
But you knew yourself that it wasn't.
I knew it wasn't.
Yeah.
And not only that, my dives were easy. There were no incidents. It was like I never broke the charts. I was so like everything was. There was no question. I didn't bolt up. Everything was good. I had done like 35 dives in a week, but it was all, very planned and careful. And so anyway, like day 2, I'm like propping my legs up to get the swelling down. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And allergic reaction that doesn't get treated can have some pretty serious side effects. Well, so the side effects started taking on the symptoms of decompression sickness. I lost hearing in one of my ears, which is now we're starting to get neurological symptoms, which may be. So I called Divers Alert Network, and they were like, honestly, this doesn't sound at all like decompression sickness. I shared my dive profile. They're like, but just to be safe, let's get you in a hyperbaric chamber. I'm like, oh man, I had a trip to Malaysia planned the next day. I had to cancel my trip. I went in this chamber at a military base in Singapore. First off, they'd never seen a white woman on the base before, a white person. Like they had never seen a non-Asian person on the base. They'd never seen. So they were like looking at me like, who is this person? Why is this person on our base? This is a strict military Singapore base, and they were just looking at me like, why is she here? But I had to go for like 3 consecutive days, and they didn't know what they were doing. They admitted to me that they'd only ever used the chamber for training. So, and I didn't really feel like it was helping at all. Like I was having headaches, and I would say, oh my gosh, my head is like, and I never get headaches, by the way. I was like, my head is hurting. Oh my gosh, it's really hurting. So they give me aspirin, and I know from my training that's the worst thing you can do when someone's having symptoms. That was just stupid. But anyway, long story short, I talked to the doctor there, and he's like, if you say the symptoms are better, I can release you, and then you can get on the plane. My next trip was to Tokyo. I can let you go. But if you don't say you're better, then I'm going to have to make you come back. And I'm like, wait, are you telling me that even though I'm telling you my symptoms are not better, if I say they're better? And he said, that's what I'm telling you. I'm like, okay, so they're better. He said, okay. And he, like, literally. So, so I get on the plane and I tell the person next to me what's going on. I'm like, look, I really don't think I have any kind of decompression sickness, but if anything happens, just all I need is oxygen. Just get oxygen for me, okay? And she's like, oh, I totally get it, not a problem. Everything was fine, but the symptoms got worse. I got to Tokyo, they got worse. Because altitude isn't going to help symptoms. No Benadryl in Tokyo, in Japan either, by the way. I finally get back to the States, and I went to Dr. Kepper here, who is the SCUBA doc. He tested me. He checked it. He's like, you didn't have decompression sickness. You had a severe allergic reactions, like severe. And he actually thinks that it started with not with the cigarette smoke, but with exposure to, they served like a delicacy, puffer and like other fish that was not cooked the right way, and that I had actually started the symptoms of allergic reaction much sooner. And but anyway, he was like, you didn't have it. So I was like, okay. But anyway, so you may, if you call Divers Alert Network, they may make you have it, but call them anyway. So dehydration is a much more likely thing to happen, especially because we forget to drink water. We're in water. You know, we forget to hydrate. And you'll see me constantly tell you, like, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. So bring water on the trips with us. Bring water on Sunday to have with you by the pool. You're going to need to stay hydrated. And they say avoid diuretic drinks. I love my coffee. I just say add water. Make sure that after you're done with your coffee, you drink plenty of water, okay? Hydrate frequently. Now, one of the things, Jeff, you were saying, well, you know, is there any policing of depth and things like that? And there's not a lot other than on boats that say advanced divers only. But one of the things that can happen if you go too deep is something called nitrogen narcosis. This does not happen at 60 feet. This happens at like 80 to 100 feet. And this is a test question asking you about nitrogen narcosis. But it is a deep issue, and it's something that's easily fixed. So, and the thing is with when people get nitrogen narcosis, they do stupid things. Sometimes they think they can breathe underwater. So people have been known to take their regulator out of their mouth and to do really stupid. Some people get panicked. Some people do all kinds of stupid things. That's why you don't want to do a really deep dive for the first time without an instructor. You really want to get certified to go to those depths and make sure that you understand what your body may do with nitrogen narcosis. Some people, you know, get a feeling of euphoria. They feel like they're drunk. All kinds of different symptoms can happen. All you need to do is, if you do a deep dive and you feel those symptoms, is just ascend a little, and the symptoms will go right away. But it's just too much nitrogen in the body. Okay. Another way you can help with that is reduce the nitrogen mix in the gas, and so take a nitrox class. That's going to give you more oxygen in the mix rather than nitrogen. So again, it used to be called Martini's Law. Let's talk about hazardous marine animals. Have any of you ever experienced a sea urchin puncture? No? So these are not very common, but if you ever did, you would want to remove the spines and don't worry about anything staying in the skin. They'll typically dissolve by themselves. Clean the wound, soak it in hot water, and see a physician if it's not a simple wound or if it's in the joints. Sponge dermatitis. First off, don't touch anything that you don't know what it is. Just don't touch things. If you touch a sponge that's a stinging sponge, then you're going to get sponge dermatitis. You don't want to rub it. You want to soak it in household vinegar for 15 minutes. Use adhesive tape to remove sponge tissue and small spicules, and then use hydrocortisone for inflammation. Allergic reactions, including to jellyfish. How many of you have had jellyfish stings before? If you're Floridian, you probably have had it. So some people have allergic reactions to jellyfish. That would suck. But remove tentacles with tweezers. Don't flush with fresh water. Don't urinate on the wound. That's an old wives' tale. You can use shaving cream and remove the nematocysts, soak it in hot water, use topical pain relievers. On dive boats, they'll have boxed jellyfish, they'll have diluted vinegar for boxed jellyfish. What I do is I wear a dive skin. Even in warm water, I wear a dive skin. It's a 0.5 mil skin. I have a couple of extras for the girls that they can wear. I always take care of the girls in the class first. You guys, I hope you understand. But the dive skin will protect you. The jellyfish would just bounce off of you. So it also helps with a little extra thermal protection. So I wear my dive skin even in warm water in tropical climates. I just don't really like getting stung by jellyfish. So, and it's great. They just don't sting through it. Mobility adjustments. There are going to be mobility adjustments with lifting heavy gear, walking with fins. If you do walk with fins, you want to walk backward, by the way. For the most part, there's going to be drag and current. And you need to streamline your gear. Everything needs to be tidy on your gear. Now, preparing the equipment, I'm going to zip through this because none of this is going to make a lot of sense until we actually have the gear in front of us. So on Sunday, when we're poolside, all of this is going to make a lot more sense. But there's an O-ring right here, and that O is going to come out to the back of your head. And then you're going to stand behind the BC. Again, BC stands for Buoyancy Compensator, sometimes called BCD, stands for Buoyancy Compensation Device. And you're going to stand behind the cylinder, and you're going to attach it and make sure that that strap is nice and tight. Next is the regulator set. You remove the dust cap, and you have two breathing apparatus. One, the black one is the primary, and the yellow one is the octopus. And then you have gauges that'll give you depth and other information. And then this is something that connects to the BC, the power inflator hose. And essentially you just figure out where things go when you stand behind it. Second stages are what you breathe out of. They go on your right side, which is why your snorkel is going to go on your left side. So your snorkel should go on your left side because you don't want them to get in the way of the breathing apparatus. Okay? And you're going to make sure that you connect the regulator only to finger tight. And you're going to put everything together. And I will show you how to do this by the pool when it makes a lot more sense. Questions so far? Okay. I know it's a lot of information and we're halfway through the evening. And I think I just over-clicked to the point where I have the spinning ball right now. All right, we're still streaming right now. Well, I'll tell you what, we will go ahead and take a break, and we'll take a quick 5-minute break, and I will stop streaming, and we will come back.